Ironman suit, and let's do it. Okay, so if we take a look at this image, obviously this is metal, the red part, and we cannot see lots of details unfortunately in this image, but we'll be trying to make the base layer, you know, a tad dirty, and then add some of these scratches and imperfections on top. It would be a lot simpler. We can simply use one of the you know, gold shaders that we created and borrow these imperfections from that and apply to the red part of the suit here. But the main part that we're going to be working on is the main base red metal here. Okay, so let's start working on this. I'm gonna just like create a new Arnold standard shader, and let's name it red metal 01 and apply it here. Now let's open up the shader, and first of all let me increase the diffuse weight and change the color for the time being to this red color that I have prepared here, and let's go to maybe something like 0.95 here. Okay, and come down here to the specular, increase the weight. Let me change my microfacet distribution to GGX, turn on Fresnel, and Fresnel use IR maybe something like 5, or let's see, 4.5 here. And the specular color, I'll be using an off-white color with a tint of red, as you can see here. That will help. Maybe the specular roughness can be a bit smaller, and okay, so this is our base shader, and now we can start working on our diffuse color map, specular weight map, and specular roughness map, and get our base shader up and running. So for the diffuse color, let's use a layer color and connect it to diffuse color here, and for the first layer I'm going to be using a mix node, and I'm going to be mixing these two red colors. So this red color that you can sample it from the reference images, and this one which is a darker version. Okay, and that's going to be our first layer. And let's use a simple noise to control the mix amount here. So if I connect this noise directly, let's increase the octaves, distortion, scale here, maybe even 50, and let's decrease the amplitude, something like this. Okay, and now we're gonna get something like this. So you can see it's not that obvious, but I think it would be enough for the base layer here. So for the second layer, let's use a simple image node. I'm just trying to add detail, really, not in any specific way, because the shader and the reference image that we have isn't that great. So I'm just trying to make up some detail as I go and add a bit more interest to the diffuse color map. So let's maybe use this map BW2 and connect this directly. If we can have our IPR, there we go. Let me increase its scale and use a color correction map after it. Maybe add some gamma and some contrast here. I'm just trying to multiply this image over this red color, so I want to make it very bright and left some few dark spots. So this is going to be our layer 2, and if I connect the image here, increase this and change the blending mode to multiply, now as you can see we get this darker spot on top, so maybe something like this. And for the third layer, let's add another image here, which is going to be, let's see, maybe we have BW38 here. Okay, so let me connect this, and again let's change the scale to 3 and 3. And I want the third layer just to add some brighter spot to the overall diffuse color map, right? So what I'm gonna do is to invert this image using a complement node. Okay, and then use a color correction after the complement to, there we go. Let me just add some contrast by decreasing the gamma, maybe something like that, and also increase the contrast itself. Now this is going to be our third layer, and change the blending mode to lighten, and let's decrease its overall alpha, maybe to something like this, very slightly affecting the overall map here, right? So this is basically our diffuse color map, and if I connect the standard shader, now let's work on the specular weight and specular roughness and basically just add some general unevenness to them to make the whole shader a bit more interesting. So let's quickly do that. Now run the IPR, and let's see. So for the specular weights, let's use layer color node again and connect that to, okay, let's see. So that's our specular weight here, and for the first layer, let me use a ramp float here, and just make some space here. There we go. For the first layer, maybe we can use this map from our diffuse color map, and let's connect it to the input and use it as layer 1 here. In the ramp itself, obviously right now the results will be way too reflective, so let me decrease the maybe to something like this. And the parts that are less reflective, maybe we can also increase this maybe to something like this. Okay, just take a look at this part. So this can be our first layer. As you can see now, we add some unevenness to the surface. And for the second layer, what I'm going to be using is maybe use this BW38 map that we have here. Okay. But let's use a color correction node here and connect this as the input. If I connect this directly, let's add some contrast by decreasing the gamma. And I think we also need a ramp, so maybe we just borrow from here and use this as our second layer. So layer 2, and let's just going to invert the map here. Maybe to something like this, and the darker parts maybe something like this. Okay. There you go. Okay, there we go. And this, if I increase it, you can see we only see our... So this is the result that we're going to have by combining these two layers. And honestly, I'm just going to decrease this just to make it less visible. And this is our overall map. It doesn't have to be so much contrasty. We don't want to make it so dirty. You can see we have some nice detail in here. Okay, so that's our specular weight map, and if I render this section and connect my standard shader, you can see the result here. Great. Now for the specular roughness, I'm going to be using another layer color here. Okay, and this is going to be the specular roughness map. Perfect. Now for the first layer, I'm going to be using this color correction node that we have here from our BW38 image, right? And let me just have a ramp float here and use it as the input. So this is our first layer. Right. And what I'm going to do is to just decrease the contrast. Maybe, I don't know, maybe something like this. Okay. And so now, as you can see, we have some unevenness in the specular roughness too. Now for the second layer, I'm going to be using the same map that we use for our layer 1 of our specular weight, which is this one. Okay, so let me just duplicate this RAM float node and let's come down here, and if I connect this here, this is going to be our second layer. So I really don't want to have a lot of contrast in this one, so maybe something like this can be nice. And if I connect this to the second layer, layer 2, this is the result, and maybe just increase the second layer a tad. So okay, and also I want to add some kind of rougher spots on top, so let's use another image here, which is going to be this one, PW41. Connect it here, and this can be nice, but let's increase the scale maybe to something like 5 and 5. Okay, and this is going to be our layer 3. Increase its alpha, and let me change its blending mode to something like add or lighten. As you can see, we get this brighter spot, but there are two. Maybe do something like this. Now this brighter spot are gonna have more rough specular reflections. So if you take a look at the result, for example, here, and connect our standard shader, you can see we have these bright spots on top. Okay, that's nice. So that's what we have for our standard shader. Now we need to add those scratches and those damages on top of the standard shader. We're going to be using another standard shader and use a layer color node to combine this first standard shader and the second standard shader. So let me just take a look at the final result before going there. Okay, so this is the result that we have here, and it's quite beautiful. What I'm going to do before actually working on the second standard shader is to add the bump mapping. And let me just select this region and increase the resolution so we can see how the bump mapping is going to look like in the final render. Okay, so let's open this up, and for the bump map I'm going to be using this image, which is BW38. So let's load a bump 2D node and let's connect this image as the bump map. Okay, great. So this is the standard shader. This is going to be our shader for the time being, and let me connect this and run the IPR here. 1 centimeter is going to be way too huge, so let's decrease it from now on to something like 0.1. Let's just take a look at this smaller region. Obviously that's way too much, so let's go to, I think we use 0, 1, 2 for the golden part. Let's see if that number works here or not. Great, now as you can see we have some high frequency details in our bump map, and it doesn't have to be anything too obvious. If you want, you can increase your bump height, but I think for this render this number would work just fine. Just change the resolution here and open up the shader here. So that's our first standard shader, and let's work on our second standard shader and connect it here. Let's run the IPR. It should be very simple. Just wait for the IPR here. Can zero out the diffuse, increase the specular weight, maybe set roughness of 0.3. GGX for now use IOR, and maybe a high IOR value like 25. Okay. Now for the specular color, let's use a simple image here, which is going to be BW32. Okay, connect it here, and maybe let's increase the scale to something like 3 or even 5, and you can connect this to the specular color and connect the standard shader here, and that's what we're gonna have. I don't want to have these very dark spots, so what I can do is to simply use a RAM float and maybe go to something like 0.1. Let's see. Okay, now this is our second standard shader here, right? So let's just put it here. A layer color node to combine our two standard shaders. So this is the red metal here as our first layer, and this is going to be our second layer. Okay, and now this is gonna be connected to the shader input of our bump map also. Great. Now for the layer 12, obviously you can take a look at the references and create your own alpha for the second layer. You can see some of these scratches here and there, but just to make this tutorial a bit shorter, what I'm going to do is to copy this map from the gold shader that we created. I'm just going to Control-C here, and let's copy them here, paste them here, sorry, Control-V, and this is this map that we created. Let's just see the result here. Okay, so as you can see, it's a very simple map. Maybe for the time being, I'm actually going to bypass the clamp nodes, and also for our layer 3. So this is our first layer. As you can see, it's a very simple, just worked on this map for the gold shader that we had. This is the curvature, and that's the third layer that adds this scratches and dirts. And now we can use this layer as our layer 2 alpha. Okay, so let's see. Layer 2 alpha. Now if we just take a look maybe at this section here and connect the bump here, we should be able to see the results. So this is the result that we are having, and I think the two shaders are blended nicely together. Now let's just see the whole thing, and I'll be back to walk you through the results. Okay, so this is what we have in the IPR. Maybe the red color can be a bit more saturated. You know, it really depends on the reference image that you are looking at. For example, in this one, the red is way too saturated, and in the reference image that we had, the main one, it's not that saturated. You know, the lighting is really important here, but generally speaking, the shader can be a bit more saturated, but we can do those stuff in post. So I think this would be enough for the time being. What I'm going to do is to simply duplicate this and create a bit more maybe kind of dirtier version of what we have. So if I open up this metal here, and very quickly what we can do, I'm just going to simply delete these maps and delete this third layer too. And for the layer 1, let's quickly load an image, and it's going to be VW53 that we have used previously. So there we go. Let's run the IPR. I know we're going to be using a complement node to invert the values here. Let's wait for the IPR to wake up. Okay, make sure to apply this shader here. And this is the complement node that we have. Okay, let me just increase the scale to something like 4 and 4, and maybe color correction here to add some contrast, decrease the gamma. Okay, and this is going to be our first layer. So layer 1, and this is the resulting map. Perfect. Now we can connect this to see the final result here for our second red metal. Obviously you can go ahead and work on these shaders and improve them and add more detail, but I think this would be enough for the time being. What I'm going to do is to, so this is the result that we have here. Great. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and actually render all of these 5 shaders that we have with high quality render settings. Maybe we can take a look at that. I'm just going to increase my camera samples maybe to something like 4. Okay, and I think that would be it. And the output size maybe to something like let's see, maybe 2000 by 2000 here. So I'm gonna go ahead and render all of these 5 shaders that we have created in this lesson. And when I'm done, I'll be back to do some very basic color correction inside After Effects just to get nicer results. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay folks, so the renders are finished, and this is our first render. And if I zoom in, you can see all the details in here. Our second render. The third render. And that's the fourth render here. As you can see, we have some nice detail here. Make sure to check out the high-res images of these renders in your project file folder. And that's the 5th render. Okay, now I'm gonna go inside After Effects and actually do some compositing quickly. So here we are inside After Effects, and I have imported those 5 renders here. Okay, and also a matte. Okay, let's get started quickly. I'm just going to create a new composition. Make sure your comp is 16-bit here, and very quick color correction here, right? So just going to simply duplicate this layer, and let's apply a Gaussian blur to something like 6 and change the blending mode to something like soft light or overlay, and let's set the opacity to something like 50 here. So this is our original render, and this is this one. Okay, now what I can do is to maybe desaturate it a bit, because if you take a look at the reference image here, you can see it's a bit more desaturated compared to what we have here. So let's create a new adjustment layer, Control Alt and Y, and also let's load in this mask and make sure this adjustment layer is going to only affect these brighter areas. And now let's search for hue and saturation, apply it, and I can simply now desaturate it without affecting the rest here, right? So you can go ahead and try different looks, maybe increase the saturation if you want. Let's see, maybe something like -20 would be nice. You can decrease it even more if you wanted to, maybe -30. Right, now it's getting a lot closer, right? And if you wanted to, you can also, you know, try different colors here. But for the timing, I think that is enough. And finally, I'm just going to add another adjustment layer, and that was the desaturation. That's going to be our overall color correction. And let me just use the Magic Bullet film plugin here, and there we have it. And you got different film looks, and I'm just going to be using this one, and maybe decrease the opacity to something like 25. And now you get these effects. So that's our original render, and that's the color corrected version. Maybe that's a bit too much, but it's really up to you how you want to do it. Okay, now for the red metal, we can do the same thing basically. So this is the comp that we have, and if I just duplicate this and let's name it red metal. Okay, so if I just open it up, I can simply select these two gold and layers and replace them with this maybe first metal here. And that's the result we're getting. What I'm possibly going to do is to go to this desaturation layer, maybe just turn it off completely. Right, this is a lot closer to what we have. And maybe we can turn off this overall color correction adjustment layer that we applied the Magic Bullet film plugin to it. Okay, so that's the result that we're having. So that's our composition here, and I did a bit of the same thing for all of the other images that we have and renders. So this is the first one, the second one, and the third one. Okay, you can see we have some nice detail here. The metal, the first metal, and the second metal. Okay, so there you have it, and I hope you enjoyed and learned a lot in this lesson and in this update. Let me know if there is any specific shader in your mind so I can make it happen, and hopefully I will see you in the next update and in our next courses. Thanks for watching this tutorial. It was Kamal Khazri with you for mographplus.com, and have a good time. Thanks for watching this video tutorial. It was a free sample from our course Developing Realistic Shaders in Arnold for Cinema 4D Volume 2. To watch the rest of this lesson and tons of other video tutorials, make sure to visit our website mographplus.com and check the entire course out. Also, don't forget to check the first volume of this course. See you next time.